friends, welcome to another episode of Camera Quest, the show where I try out a bunch of old cameras, things that I found secondhand shops. In this case, this is an old Linhof 4x5, and this was a borrow. There is a man who shall remain nameless, but he responded to an Instagram story that I put out there that I would like to either purchase or borrow a 4x5 camera. I used to own a Graflex press camera, and I did use it for some of my model shoots. I did it for a lot of my children's photos when they were very young. And before I had that, I utilized a passport camera that I had retrofitted with a 4x5 back. So I have a lot of experience with 4x5. I sold it off maybe like 7 years ago because I felt like the cost of film went up enough that I couldn't justify cranking that stuff out. But I had some ideas for what I wanted to shoot 4x5 with, and a lot of those ideas were based off of some really cool Australian criminal photos from the 1920s. These are photos that were basically mug shots, but they're very expressive, and there's writing on the negative, and I had ideas for things that you could do with film that were very organic and also kind of took advantage of that beautiful depth of field that 4x5 has. So I put it out there on Instagram story, ended up with this camera. I want to tell you about my experiences with it. First off, it was very difficult for me to get back in the mentality of having a camera that's locked down and that I couldn't maneuver around the way I could my digital stuff, my instant film stuff, even my 35 millimeter. I'm definitely a photographer who likes to pick up and move around and sort of like examine perspectives, high and low, front, back, walk around with people, and having the camera on a tripod made things way, way, way more difficult for me. And it didn't help that the bottom of this guy, the little screw mount for your tripod, is not a standard screw mount. Now that's something you can buy an adapter for, but when I went to my first shoot with this thing, no adapter. There is a standard tripod mount over here underneath the lens area, but all your weight is over here, and if you're working on a tripod, you need to put all your weight on the tripod. You can't just mount it here. This thing's gonna tip over backwards, and if you know anything about 4x5, you are actually working with something that has a large piece of glass in the back, as well as a super expensive piece of glass in the front, and once it's broken, it's broken. So you gotta be super careful and have a real heavy-duty, sturdy tripod for a guy like this. Now the film for the 4x5 is, for me, about $35 for a box of 20 shots. Works out over $1 a shot, and if you're gonna spend that kind of money, you kind of want to make sure that the stuff that you're getting is good. So I did not have a handheld light meter. I haven't had one in a long time. I used my camera as my light meter, and I think for the first set of images that I shot outdoors, I got nothing. And the reason why I got nothing is because this particular camera, the shutter, when set to 1/500th of a second, which is what I had for the outdoor Arizona sun, it actually didn't go off. And I've done tests since then, but when you're at 1/500th on this particular camera, push the shutter, nothing happens, doesn't open. 1/60th of a second, 1/30th of a second, 1/2 of a second, opens on all of those. But I did not find that out until I shot a significant number of images. When I was testing it originally, everything looked fine. When I took it out in the field, that's what happened. So right away, you can imagine $15 worth of shots thrown straight in the trash. And I wasn't sure if that was the mistake that I was making in the first place, because with 4x5 sheet film, you can take it into the lab. The lab that's near me, Tempe Camera, only develops it once a week. So it seemed more cost effective for me to buy the chemistry, mix it myself, develop film in my closet. And for that first set of shots, there's a lot of things that could have gone wrong to give me just these blank pictures. It could have been a chemistry issue. It could have been an exposure issue. I could have, put the wrong exposure settings in there. And what it ended up being is a mechanical issue. The camera literally didn't function at a particular shutter speed. So, hard lesson to learn with this guy. There were a few other things that were a struggle with this. One involved how much light leakage there was in the sheet film. And I don't recall this being an issue in my other 4x5 that I owned, but I think I had different kinds of holders that blocked out a lot more light. In this camera, the way it works is you have your shutter open, you focus on your subject through the ground glass. Once you've got that and you have your shutter speed and aperture dialed in, you close this guy, you insert a sheet film holder, you pull out a dark slide, and then you take your shot, and then you insert your dark slide back in and you pull out your sheet film holder and move on. The sheet film holders that I'm using for this let a lot of light in, and I could tell on my images that did come out because they had this light cast that went through, and that could only come from the sun or whatever other light we were utilizing bleeding in and getting on top of the film. Now the easy solution for that is to do all your operations underneath the dark cloth, just like you would expect Ansel Adams back in the day doing. But my previous 4x5 cameras I worked with, the previous film holders I worked with, didn't have that issue. They must have had some sort of cool little blockage in there. And you know, more hard lessons to learn. The stuff that I did with the camera that I'm actually proudest of didn't involve shooting film on it at all. I just opened up the ground glass on the back and was able to shoot through that, but I am taking a picture of what's coming through the 4x5's lens. And the reason why I'm doing this, one, is to get an in-camera effect on my digital camera that sort of apes the 4x5 stuff. Also, I wanted to take advantage of the cool depth of field effects you get on a 4x5 camera. So when I shot this material that's got kind of an early 1900s cowboy family aesthetic, that felt like the right way to do it. At the time I shot this, I didn't want to mess around with the film. I knew that if I had my digital camera and just aimed it at the ground glass and, you know, focused and framed things correctly in the 4x5, I would get an equivalent of what you would get if you shot on the 4x5. Not the same exact thing, not the same level of detail, but it's got that depth of field effect that's really special. And I've done this with a lot of other kinds of cameras. You know, you take a medium format camera that has cool ground glass and you shoot into that with your digital camera and you get something that's like a hybrid digital medium format image. I know some people will think that's cheating out there, but I'm here to tell you that I'm really proud of those images. I think they look cool, and I think it's the best thing I actually did with the 4x5 was not using it for film, but using it to shoot other material through the ground glass. So I'm gonna take this camera back to its original owner. I'm glad that I tried it out. If you find yourself with a 4x5, hopefully you've got a really cool idea that's unique to that format, because I hate to poo-poo it. I really do like 4x5. It's just for me, as somebody who likes to walk around with a camera and not be stuck on a tripod or, you know, lugging really heavy gear around, I think it's too much of a burden. And I think the film cost is extremely prohibitive, and there's not much you can do about that. But hey, hopefully I'll get to try 8x10 camera pretty soon, and that's way more prohibitive and way more of a burden than a 4x5. Really looking forward to that. Having fun with photography is what this is all about. So, you know, you got a 4x5, love to hear your stories. Until then, talk to you next time.